The night was a living thing, a howling, restless beast that clawed at the windows of Blackwood Manor. Thunder growled in the distance, and the rain lashed against the Gothic spires like 1,000 skeletal fingers tapping for entry. The ancient house loomed over the moors, its shadow stretching long and hungry across the gravel drive. One by one the carriages arrived, their wheels splashing through the mud as if the very earth sought to slow their approach. The Blackwood family had been summoned, though none had seen Jonathan Blackwood in years, not since the arguments, the betrayals, the whispered scandals that had torn them apart. And now, the old man was dead. First came Vincent Blackwood, the eldest son, his broad shoulders tense beneath his greatcoat, his gloved hand gripping a silver-tipped cane like a weapon. His eyes, dark and simmering with resentment, flickered toward the manor's entrance as if expecting a ghost. Behind him, his sister Eleanor stepped down from her carriage, her face a mask of cool composure, though her knuckles whitened around the handle of her traveling case. She had always been the clever one, the one who played the long game. Then there was Reginald, Jonathan's younger brother, his jowls flushed with drink even now, his laughter too loud for a house of mourning. He clapped Vincent on the back, earning only a venomous glare. Last came Eliza, the youngest, wide-eyed and trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of the secrets this family had buried. The doors groaned open, revealing the gaunt figure of Mr. Graves, the family solicitor. His spectacles caught the candlelight, turning his eyes into two flat, reflective discs. "You are expected," he said, his voice like dry parchment. Inside, the air smelled of dust and decay. Portraits of long-dead Blackwoods watched from the walls, their painted eyes following the heirs as they moved through the foyer. The fire in the hearth spat and hissed, casting jagged shadows. Vincent was the first to break the silence. "Why are we really here, Graves?" The old man wouldn't have left us so much as a shilling without a game. Graves' lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. "All will be made clear at midnight." And with that, the clock began its slow, inevitable countdown toward the reading of the will, and the unraveling of the Blackwood family's darkest truths. Midnight. The great clock in the hall shuddered to life, its brass gears grinding like an old man's dying breath. One by one the 12 chimes rang out, each one heavier than the last, as if time itself were pressing down upon the gathered heirs. The storm outside had not relented. If anything, it had grown fiercer, rattling the leaded windows with a sound like bones shaking in a coffin. They sat in the study, the room where Jonathan Blackwood had once ruled his empire with a merciless grip. His presence still lingered in the towering bookshelves, the mahogany desk scarred with the marks of his penknife, the oil portrait above the fireplace, those cold, unblinking eyes watching them even now. The air smelled of leather and pipe smoke, undercut by something darker, something stale and forgotten. Mr. Graves stood behind the desk, his skeletal fingers untying the black ribbon binding the will. The document crackled as he unfolded it, the sound sharp as a breaking bone. The heirs leaned forward, some eager, some wary, all hungry. Vincent sat with his arms crossed, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle twitched beneath his skin. Eleanor's hands rested neatly in her lap, but her knuckles were white. Reginald swirled a glass of Jonathan's best brandy, already half drunk, his smirk not quite hiding the greed in his eyes. Eliza, youngest and most nervous, sat apart from the others, her fingers twisting the fabric of her morning dress. Graves cleared his throat. "I, Jonathan Alistair Blackwood, being of sound mind." A bitter laugh escaped Reginald. "Sound mind?" The man was a tyrant and a madman. Graves ignored him. Do hereby declare that my last testament shall not be a mere distribution of wealth, but a final reckoning. Silence. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. To my heirs, who have squandered their birthright with greed and deceit, I leave not a single penny, unless they prove themselves worthy. Vincent shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. What the devil is this? Graves continued, unperturbed. My fortune shall be claimed only by the one who can solve the riddles I have set forth. The first clue lies where the Blackwood name was first etched in stone. Eleanor's eyes flickered toward the window, toward the family crypt, barely visible through the rain. Reginald slammed his glass down. This is absurd. The old bastard's toying with us from the grave. But Graves wasn't finished. He reached into his coat and produced a second letter, this one sealed with black wax. And should any of you doubt the stakes, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, know this. I did not die of natural causes. I was murdered, and the killer sits among you tonight. The fire spat, the wind howled, and in the shadows someone smiled. The storm had swallowed the moon whole, leaving the grounds of Blackwood Manor drowned in a darkness so thick it felt alive. The wind carried whispers, old whispers, the kind that slithered through the cracks of time, murmuring secrets best left buried. They had all come, though none wanted to admit their fear. Vincent led the way, his lantern cutting a feeble path through the rain, the flame inside guttering like a dying man's last breath. Behind him, Eleanor moved with deliberate grace, her skirts lifted just enough to avoid the mud, as if even now she refused to let the filth of Blackwood touch her. Reginald stumbled, cursing, the brandy on his breath sharp enough to cut through the damp air. Eliza trailed behind them all, her small frame shivering, though not from the cold. The crypt loomed ahead, a squat, ancient thing of weathered stone, its iron gates twisted like the ribs of some long-dead beast. The Blackwood name was carved above the entrance, the letters worn smooth by time and rain, but still legible, still accusing. Where the Blackwood name was first etched in stone. Vincent shoved the gates open with a screech of rusted hinges. The smell that rushed out was thick, wet earth, old rot, the cloying sweetness of decay. The lantern light flickered over the rows of sarcophagi, each one bearing the name of a Blackwood who had come before, their likenesses carved in cold marble, eyes staring blankly into eternity. Reginald let out a hoarse laugh. Jonathan always did have a flair for the dramatic. What now? Do we start digging up corpses? Eleanor ignored him, her fingers trailing along the edge of the nearest tomb. There's something here, she murmured. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, she pressed a hidden latch. A low, grinding sound filled the crypt as one of the slabs shifted, revealing a hollow space beneath. Inside lay a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Vincent snatched it up, flipping it open with rough hands. The ink was faded, but the words were clear enough. Jonathan's handwriting, sharp and unforgiving. To my heirs, the first truth is this: our fortune was never clean. Blood built this house, deceit upholds it, and now one of you will spill more to claim it. Eliza made a small, broken sound in the back of her throat. Vincent's grip on the journal tightened, his face a mask of fury, and then a noise, a scrape of stone on stone. They turned as one. The crypt door was closing. Someone had followed them. Someone was locking them in. The library of Blackwood Manor had always been Jonathan's sanctuary, a cavern of knowledge and deception, where leather-bound books whispered secrets and the heavy velvet drapes swallowed the light whole. Now, in the flickering glow of a single candelabra, the room felt less like a refuge and more like a mausoleum of forgotten truths. They had returned from the crypt, shaken, the journal's damning words still echoing in their minds. The storm had worsened, rattling the windows with a fury that made the candle flames tremble. Shadows stretched long across the Persian carpets, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to watch them from the corners. Vincent paced before the fireplace, his boots sinking into the thick pile of the rug with each agitated step. "This is madness," he growled, tossing the journal onto an ornate reading table. "The old man's toying with us even now. Blood built this house. What does that even mean?" Eleanor stood by the towering bookshelves, her fingers tracing the spines of ancient tomes with deliberate calm. "It means exactly what it says," she replied, her voice cool. "The Blackwood fortune was never pure. We've all heard the rumors, the deals made in back alleys, the rivals who disappeared. Jonathan wasn't just reminding us, he was warning us." Reginald, slumped in a high-backed chair, snorted into his glass. "Or he's sending us on a wild goose chase while the real fortune slips through our fingers." His words slurred slightly, the brandy finally loosening his tongue. Eliza, silent until now, hovered near the grand piano in the corner. Her fingers brushed the keys lightly, as if afraid to wake some sleeping beast. Then, with a sudden intake of breath, she stopped. "There's something here," she whispered. The others turned as she pressed a hidden latch beneath the piano's lid. A soft click echoed through the room, and a section of the bookshelf beside her swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway, dark and yawning. Reginald's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hardwood. His face had gone a sickly shade of gray, his hands clawing at his throat as his breath came in ragged, wet bursts. Foam gathered at the corners of his lips. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 3 hollow chimes as the remaining heirs gathered in the portrait gallery, their shadows stretching long across the checkered marble floor. The air smelled of beeswax and something faintly metallic, like old blood thinly veiled beneath polish. Jonathan Blackwood's first wife, Seraphina, watched them from her gilded frame. Painted in her youth, her beauty was ethereal, pale as moonlight, with eyes that seemed to follow you no matter where you stood. The portrait had always hung slightly apart from the others, as if even in death she remained aloof from the Blackwood legacy. Vincent reached for the frame first, his fingers brushing the carved edge. "Where the Blackwood name was first etched in stone led us to the crypt," he muttered. "This damned painting must be the next piece of his game." Eleanor studied the portrait with narrowed eyes. Seraphina died young. They say Jonathan never recovered from it. She tilted her head. They also say she knew all his secrets. A gust of wind rattled the windows, making the candle flames dance. For a brief moment, Seraphina's smile seemed to widen. Eliza gasped as Vincent's probing fingers found a hidden catch. With a soft click, the portrait swung forward on silent hinges, revealing a small recess in the wall. Inside lay an iron key, blackened with age, and a single sheet of parchment. Eleanor snatched the note before Vincent could, her eyes scanning the elegant script. "Beware the sins of the father," she read aloud, "for they are visited upon the children. The key opens what was sealed, but know this, some doors should remain forever locked." Vincent grabbed the key, his face twisting in triumph. The old vault. This must open the old vault. A floorboard creaked behind them. Margaret stood in the doorway, her morning dress blending into the shadows. "That vault hasn't been opened in 20 years, she said softly. "Not since the night Seraphina died." The candles flickered violently as thunder shook the manor. In the sudden play of light and shadow, Seraphina's portrait seemed to weep black tears. The study door clicked shut with finality, sealing them in a tomb of oak-paneled walls and suffocating silence. The fire had burned low, casting the room in a hellish glow that made the portraits of dead Blackwoods seem to lean in closer, hungry for fresh scandal. Vincent slammed the iron key onto Jonathan's desk, the sound like a gunshot in the hush. "Enough riddles," he snarled. "That vault hasn't been touched in decades. Whatever's inside—" Eleanor cut him off with a slash of her hand. She was standing by the secret compartment she'd discovered behind the Tempest's first edition, her gloves gray with dust. "You're thinking too small, brother." Her voice was a razor wrapped in silk. "The vault is a distraction. This is what matters." Between her fingers, she held a yellowed envelope, its wax seal broken long ago. The Blackwood crest stared up at them, a serpent eating its own tail. Eliza made a small, wounded sound. "We shouldn't—" "Oh, spare us your delicacy," Vincent snapped, snatching the letter. His eyes scanned the page, then widened. A vein pulsed at his temple. "You bitch!" he breathed, whirling on Eleanor. She didn't flinch. "You always knew Jonathan doubted you." The letter trembled in Vincent's grip. Mr. Graves, silent as a specter in the corner, finally stepped forward. "Allow me." He took the page and read aloud. "To whom it may concern, should any question arise regarding the legitimacy of Vincent Alastair Blackwood, DNA testing confirms he shares no blood relation to—" Vincent's fist connected with Graves' jaw before he could finish. The lawyer staggered, but his smirk remained, blood gleaming on his teeth. Eliza pressed herself against the bookshelves, her hands over her mouth. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the truth in stark flashes. Eleanor's cold satisfaction. Vincent's world crumbling, Graves wiping his mouth with a handkerchief, his eyes alight with something darker than professional interest. And in the shadows beneath the desk, half hidden by the Persian rug, a single pearl button from Margaret's dress. She'd been here, she'd known. The clock struck 4, its chimes swallowed by thunder. Somewhere in the house, a door creaked open. The attic smelled of forgotten things, dried lavender and mothballs, cedar, and the faint metallic tang of old secrets. Dust motes swirled in the slanted light of a single hurricane lamp, catching on spiderwebs that draped the rafters like tattered funeral veils. The storm still raged beyond the small, grime-clouded window, casting erratic shadows across stacks of trunks and shrouded furniture. Vincent's hands shook as he turned the iron key in the lock of Jonathan's ancient sea chest, the one that had traveled with him from London to Calcutta and back. The key protested with a screech, as though reluctant to reveal what had been sealed away for decades. Eleanor hovered at his shoulder, her breath shallow. Eliza stood apart, her arms wrapped around herself, as if she already knew, already felt, the weight of what they were about to uncover. The chest groaned open. Inside, nestled between folds of yellowed silk, lay 3 things. A revolver, its barrel dull with age, but still lethal. A stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. And a second will. Eleanor snatched the document, her gloves leaving smudges on the parchment as she unfolded it. Her lips moved silently, then stilled. When she looked up, her face was ashen. "It's dated the day before he died," she whispered. Vincent wrenched it from her. His eyes scanned the lines once, twice, as if the words might rearrange themselves. They did not. Jonathan's voice, crisp and merciless even from the grave, leaped off the page. To my so-called heirs, you have spent your lives squandering my name, my fortune, and my patience. Let it be known that I leave my entire estate to the Blackwood orphanage, with one exception. Eliza made a small, broken sound. Vincent's grip on the paper turned vicious. The sole item of value to be bestowed upon my true heir, whose identity lies within the letters contained herein. The silence that followed was thicker than the dust in the air. Then, from the shadows near the stairwell, a voice. I wondered when you'd find those. Margaret stepped into the flickering light, her morning dress blending into the darkness. In her hands, she cradled a small wooden box. You're wrong, you know, she said softly. About all of it. She opened the box. Inside lay a lock of golden hair, a tiny baby's ring, and a photograph of Serafina, not as a society wife, but as a young mother, her face alight with joy, and the child in her arms had Eliza's eyes. The storm had exhausted itself by dawn. Pale gold light spilled through the broken, stained glass window of Blackwood Manor's grand foyer, casting fractured colors across the marble floor where Vincent now knelt, the revolver heavy in his hand. Eleanor stood frozen near the staircase, her usual composure shattered. The letters, Jonathan's final cruelty, fluttered at her feet, their contents laid bare. Proof that she had been manipulating them all, playing heir against heir in hopes of carving out her own piece of the fortune. Margaret stood by the door, her hand resting on Eliza's shoulder. The girl, no, the true heir, was silent, her fingers clutching the locket Jonathan had left for her. Inside, the portrait of Serafina seemed to smile softly, as if she had known this moment would come. Mr. Graves adjusted his spectacles, the morning light glinting off the lenses, as he regarded them all with the air of a scientist observing a particularly fascinating experiment. The police will be here shortly, he said mildly. For Reginald's murder, of course. Vincent's breath hitched. You can't prove anything. Graves smiled. Can't I? A clock chimed softly somewhere in the house, marking the hour. Outside, a carriage rolled to a stop, the sound of booted feet on gravel unmistakable. Margaret leaned down, pressing a kiss to Eliza's hair. Come, child, she murmured. There's nothing left for us here. And as they stepped out into the dawn, the great doors of Blackwood Manor swung shut behind them, not with a bang, but with a whisper, as if the house itself was finally at peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.